He was buried not once, but thrice. The man buried, 3 times, the untold story of Aguiyi Ironsi. In July 1966, Nigeria was on edge. The country was barely 6 years old, but political tensions were rising dangerously. The first military coup earlier that year had shaken the nation, and the man who emerged as leader, Major General Johnson Aguiyi Ironsi, was trying to hold the fragile country together. But unknown to him, another storm was already forming. And before the year ended, Ironsi would be dead, secretly buried, and eventually buried 3 different times. His story would not only become one of tragedy, but also one of resilience, because decades later, his own son would rise to serve Nigeria in government. The night everything changed. On the night of July 29, 1966, soldiers in northern Nigeria began to mutiny. Many of them were angry about the events of the January coup earlier that year. Several prominent northern political leaders had been assassinated, and many soldiers believed their region had been unfairly targeted. Although Ironsi himself had stopped the January coup, resentment toward his government continued to grow. At the time of the rebellion, Ironsi was visiting the western city of Ibadan. He was staying with the western region's military governor, Lieutenant Colonel Adekunle Fajuyi. Suddenly, rebellious soldiers surrounded the government house. They demanded that Ironsi be handed over. Fajuyi refused. Instead, he made a decision that would later be remembered as one of the greatest acts of loyalty in Nigerian history. He told the soldiers that if they wanted Ironsi, they would have to take him as well. The 2 men were taken away together. Not long after, they were executed by the mutinous soldiers. Nigeria's first military ruler had been killed after just 6 months in power. A secret burial. What happened next shocked the country. The soldiers who killed Ironsi did not give him a state funeral. There was no national mourning. Instead, his body was quietly buried in secrecy near Ibadan. The burial was done quickly and without ceremony. There were no military honors, no official recognition, and very few witnesses. For the family of Aguiyi Ironsi, the pain was unimaginable. Not only had they lost a father and husband, they had also lost the chance to properly mourn him. For years, the circumstances surrounding his death and burial remained surrounded by mystery and silence. The second burial. As Nigeria moved toward the devastating Nigerian Civil War in 1967, the country became deeply divided. But even amid the turmoil, many people believed that Ironsi deserved dignity in death. Eventually, his remains were exhumed from the secret grave. They were taken to his hometown of Umuahia in eastern Nigeria. There, his family arranged a second burial. This time, it was done with more respect and ceremony, surrounded by relatives and community members who wanted to honor the man they believed had tried to preserve Nigeria's unity. But history was not finished yet. The third burial. Years later, as Nigeria slowly stabilized after the Civil War, efforts were made to formally recognize figures who had played major roles in the country's history. Among them was Aguiyi Ironsi. His remains were once again moved, this time for a final burial that acknowledged his position as Nigeria's first military head of state. The third burial was far more formal than the first. Military officers attended. Government officials were present. For the first time, Ironsi was honored with the kind of recognition many believed he should have received from the beginning. 3 burials. 3 chapters in the story of a man whose life and death reflected the turbulent birth of modern Nigeria. The family left behind. When Ironsi died, his children were still young. One of them was his son, Thomas Aguiyi Ironsi. Growing up after such a tragic event could not have been easy. His father had been assassinated during a national crisis. The country was soon plunged into civil war, and Nigeria remained politically unstable for years. But Thomas Aguiyi Ironsi chose a different path. Instead of entering the military like his father, he pursued education and diplomacy. He studied abroad and built a career in international relations. Over time, he became known as a skilled diplomat and administrator. A remarkable twist of history. Decades after the tragic events of 1966, Nigeria was under civilian rule again. In 1999, former military leader Olusegun Obasanjo became the democratically elected president of Nigeria. Obasanjo had his own complicated history with Nigeria's military governments. But during his administration, something remarkable happened. Thomas Aguiyi Ironsi, son of the slain military leader, was appointed to serve in the Nigerian government. He held senior diplomatic roles and later became Nigeria's Minister of Defense. It was an extraordinary moment in Nigerian history. The son of a man who had been violently overthrown during a military coup was now serving at the highest levels of the government decades later. It showed how Nigeria had slowly begun to move beyond the deep divisions of its past, a legacy that still echoes. Today, the name Aguiyi Ironsi remains deeply connected to one of the most dramatic periods in Nigerian history. Some historians believe he tried to save the country during a moment of chaos. Others argue that his political decisions contributed to rising tensions. But almost everyone agrees on one thing. His story reflects the fragile and complicated journey of Nigeria as a nation. From his rise as the first military leader, to his assassination during a violent counter-coup, to being buried 3 separate times. Aguiyi Ironsi's life was anything but ordinary. The final reflection. History often remembers leaders for their victories or their failures. But sometimes, the most powerful stories are about what happens after they are gone. For Aguiyi Ironsi, death did not end his story. His body was moved and buried again and again, each time reflecting Nigeria's changing relationship with its own past. And decades later, his son would stand inside the very government his father once led. It was a reminder that history moves in unexpected ways. And sometimes, even after tragedy, a family's legacy can continue to shape a nation. Ending line for your video. Aguiyi Ironsi ruled Nigeria for only 6 months, but his story did not end with his death. A leader killed in a coup, a body buried 3 times, and a son who would one day serve the same nation his father once tried to lead, whose death mirrored a nation's turmoil. Assassinated, his body was hastily buried, then exhumed for a military cemetery, finally a state funeral in Umuahia. This tragedy fueled the Biafran War, a brutal conflict with millions lost.